And Michael is about to begin the prelude, and we invite everyone, if the Spirit moves you, to come up and drop a stone for people or events or anything that's important in your life. Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. To those of you in the sanctuary, those on Zoom, and also those who will view this service online, welcome to the gathering at Northern Hills, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. I'm Jack Brennan, your service leader today. Our service planning team is working to try to continually improve the service experience for those who are not able to join us in person. Those of you who can't, you are not an appendage, you are centrally a part of us. And folks more technologically competent than me are working to improve some things, including our camera angles that will show of the sanctuary. And now I will call on Alan to please acknowledge all the individuals who are on Zoom this morning.
On Zoom, we currently have Marty, Mel, and we assume user is still Dottie.
Okay, glad to have you guys with us. We've been a lay-led congregation for several years now. Nobody can remember exactly how long, but I think it's been 4 or 5 years. And I sense that we are well moved on from any apologetic mindset about this. UUism is not like the many religious denominations where authority resides solely in a church hierarchy. UUism instead promotes the belief that each of us is our own best spiritual authority, and that lived experience as we discover ourselves and engage with others is the best authority of our own spiritual path. In line with that belief, some congregants have told me lately that they strongly prefer being lay-led, that rather than hearing the same minister every week, they favor our lineup of both member and outside speakers. The member speakers serve to help us all get to know each other, and the outside speakers, like Stacey Burge today from Found House IHN, bring us wisdom and inspiration directly from the source. I've got just a couple announcements, really just about the next couple of services. Next Sunday, March 22nd, Michael, our music minister, will speak about Mother Earth and the interconnected web. And on March 29th, we have Diane Wright back again, one of our favorites. And I see a few new and maybe not brand new, but Rachel's here this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for being with us, Ruth's daughter. And Rebecca told me you're Aiden, and your friend is Ian. Okay, glad to have you guys with us. And Mike, right? Michael. You said you'd been with us once before. Well, we're very glad you're back. And now it's Light the Chalice time, right? Mm-hmm. And Alan is going to do that for us.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and
Vicki was very helpful in helping getting me some material for the opening and closing words today. They're both from just what was called Unitarian prayers, right? And so the opening words, not tied to any specific person, but is, we come together with open hearts, mindful of our neighbors who lack the safety of a home. We hold in our thoughts those who face the cold, hunger, and insecurity, remembering that behind every statistic is a person deserving of dignity, safety, and love. We pray for strength for those enduring the hardship of homelessness, and we offer gratitude for the dedicated professionals and volunteers who work tirelessly to provide warmth, sustenance, and hope. And our opening hymn, Spirit of Life, number 123, in your hymnal, if you like to use the hymnal.
Stand and sing with me, guys. We'll sing it through twice. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come
and please remain standing and join us in our unison affirmation. We pledge to create a welcoming community that celebrates human diversity, encourages spiritual growth, fosters responsiveness to our world, and commits to the future of all children. And now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Stacey Burge from Found House IHN.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are we doing today?
Good.
Good? All right. Well, it's good to be with you. Mostly I'm going to talk about the organization today and end on ways that you can become connected. This community has been connected before and would love to have you connected again. But before we get into the organization, I just want to give a little bit of context for what's happening with families experiencing housing loss in the greater Cincinnati community. You know, oftentimes when the conversation around homelessness happens, we especially our policymakers, go straight to the people that you see under bridges or at overpass stops and things like that. What you probably don't see very often in those kinds of settings are parents and children, right? And so what that means is policymakers often assume then they are not among the people experiencing housing loss, or they downplay the need. But you don't see parents and children in those settings because parents and children who are homeless hide. And they hide for one specific reason, and that is parents are afraid their children will be taken away from them if they cannot adequately provide for them. So they do not generally join tent communities or ask for money because they are trying to remain unseen. But they are there, let me tell you. There's a new team of street outreach folks specifically identifying, verifying families. And in 2025, 326 families were verified with evidence, because this is what we have to do to convince policymakers, to be sleeping outdoors or in their cars. That was just in 2025. You know, sometimes they're trying to blend in Walmart parking lots if they have a car. Sometimes they are in tents far back, off, you know, in places you can't see, abandoned buildings, not to mention the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families who are couch surfing and doubled up. So they're not outdoors, but they're also not adequately housed. So that's a pretty stark number. Half of all of the families in 2025 who called the central line that exists to place families in, there's 2 shelters that serve homeless families in Hamilton County. Found House is one of them. Half of all families that called in 2025 were turned away due to lack of capacity. So in addition to the fact that there's all of these folks out there, there is not enough community will or support to provide enough emergency capacity for families experiencing housing loss. The final sort of piece of information I'll give you around context is the situation is so bad that Cincinnati Public Schools is getting ready to open a safe sleep parking lot for 12 cars to park overnight and be safe and have access to a shelter, because so many families in that system are experiencing homelessness. That is clearly not a solution. That is clearly not something that they even want to do, but it's a backup resource that they're able to do with an existing parking lot right now because the crisis is so stark. So this is the context in which Found House IHN is currently operating, and I'll talk to you about some of our challenges. Can go to the next slide. We had a wonderful media intern who did a little video for us, and if we can make it play, I'll let that play because she did a very nice job.
Is it a structure, a roof and 4 walls? Is it a location? A house is a building with a street address. A home is where you belong. It is where you feel safe with those you love. Home is where you can be together. At Found House IHN, we shelter families from the weather. We give them a place with 4 walls and a roof. The most important thing we do is keep families together however family is defined. Whether it's a single parent, grandparents raising grandkids, or chosen family, no one should have to navigate homelessness alone. Families lose housing for numerous reasons: job loss, chronic illness, disability, unsafe living conditions, evictions due to property development, or because wages do not match rental cost. When this happens, there are few options. Some couch surf or live in cars. Some move from motel to motel, stretching limited resources just to stay sheltered. Parents cannot join tent cities or sleep under bridges. These environments are unsafe for children. In the midst of this struggle, some are forced to make heartbreaking decisions, like leaving their kids with relatives or surrendering their pet in order to access shelter. Many refuse services to stay together, holding on to the idea of home even when a house isn't available. At Found House Interfaith Housing Network, we saw a better way. That's why we created an organization where we shelter entire families together without limits. From emergency shelter to housing programs, from case management to pet support, we walk alongside families on their journey home. Our emergency shelter allows families to stay safe and indoors while working towards housing. Housing programs such as permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing provide rental assistance and case management to address job development, rental supports, healthcare, and mental health resources. We also offer specialized supports like child enrichment, assisting children in staying on track with developmental and educational milestones and ameliorating the traumatic impacts of housing instability. And finally, our pet support program offers pet shelter and services to people in homeless and domestic violence shelters, rehabs, treatment centers, hospitals, or those living doubled up with friends across the tri-state area. Nearly 90% of families we serve maintain long-term housing, proving that staying together is the best path of recovery from the trauma of housing loss. Every family's story is different, but they all share the hope of maintaining home and connection. Thanks to this community of supporters, hope remains possible, even amid the housing crisis, funding threats, and misconceptions about family homelessness. Because of you, families stay together. Because of you, home is possible.
This video as a way to thank and encourage more people to get involved, and we can go to the next slide. The truth is we need lots more people to be involved. So some of our key organizational goals at Found House are, as the video just said, keeping families together during the crisis of housing loss, whatever the family looks like. Traditionally, shelters have often had to limit who can come in based on certain check boxes of parents and minor children, and we've always tried to make sure to push those boundaries so that the family unit, whatever it looks like, can stay together. Again, that means the whole family, however they define themselves. And we, for many years, so Found House was established in 1991, and our only program was emergency shelter. And the way that we did emergency shelter is we partnered with Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Unitarian communities who would open their houses of worship overnight, and that's where the families would stay overnight for a week at a time. And then Found House provided a day center and the professional services and the plan to get back into housing. We don't do it that way anymore, and I'm going to get back to that in a second. But for many years, that was our programming. What we've been doing, despite the fact that our mission was really all about getting people back into permanent housing, right? We just did the emergency shelter part. So for the past 10 or 15 years, we've tripled in our amount of programming and the size and reach of what we offer, really to address the housing and supportive services piece of what people need, not just to get off of the street or out of a car, but back into a permanent situation where they can be stable and then move on as families and be who they are and do what they want to do. So a main goal is helping families reestablish permanent, safe, affordable housing, reducing the number of times people return to homelessness, and reducing the impact of trauma, the trauma of housing loss on parents, children, and pets. We'll talk about pets more too in a second. Next slide. So the way this breaks down into our current menu of services, and again, for some of you who maybe have been involved with us in past years, you may not be aware of all of these other things that we do around emergency shelter. We have some homeless prevention programs where we try to catch people before they get evicted, before they lose their housing, through some supportive services and financial assistance. If we can make that happen, we'll try to make that happen. Emergency shelter, which we're going to talk more about in a second. Stable permanent housing programs. So we do housing programs in a couple of different ways. We have a number of contracts with HUD, and I mention this because public advocacy is important, whereby we provide rental subsidy as well as supportive services to people. It's not Section 8. It's specifically a part of HUD that supports people coming out of homelessness. The administration tried to do away with this year. We got saved by the appropriations bill until June 30th of 2027. But HUD is back at it, trying to completely get rid of this stuff again. So please pay attention to the news and talk to your representatives, your senators, because that's how it got saved. Even the conservative Republican folks knew that there would be economic impact that they didn't want to have to explain to their constituents. So that's how we got saved by the appropriations bill. So we do that, rental support, work with private landlords, scattered site housing, 5 different contracts with HUD. We also have an apartment building that we developed that's in Walnut Hills that opened in 2023, which is affordable housing for families recovering from homelessness. So we own and operate that ourselves. Specialized supports include child enrichment. Something that we know from research is that part of what happens when families lose housing and then go through that process of couch surfing or living in cars is that kids miss school and they switch schools, sometimes up to 7 times in a year, depending on where they're staying. The research tells us that every time a kid switches school, they lose about a term's worth of information. So you can imagine that happening to a child multiple times as they're navigating housing loss. The same happens for kids who aren't in school yet, 5 and under, but it's around developmental milestones. All of the things that we kind of take for granted maybe as parents, but fine and gross motor skill development, language development, social development, that kids 0 to 5, that's their job, that's what they're developing and working on. All of that stuff gets delayed and interrupted when you're experiencing that level of traumatic stress. So our child enrichment program is attached to the apartment building we run and to emergency shelter, where we have folks working primarily with parents on helping parents integrate things into their daily routines that are helping kids stay or get back on track with development and educational readiness. Specialized supports also includes our pet support program. Since 2014, we take pets. This happened, and we get a lot of flack for it. I can't tell you how many nice ladies from various churches have called me and said, "How dare you shelter a dog when there are babies that are still homeless?" I hear that, but that's a scarcity mindset, right? Here's what it comes down to. We can't serve every family that comes to us. Letting a family keep their 10-year-old dog to come into shelter and not putting through the additional trauma of giving that dog up doesn't if we quit doing that, that doesn't mean we could serve more families. So what happened is back in 2012 and 2013, we had this just a whole spate of incidents where parents and kids were showing up to be intaked into shelter with their pet with them. And they were saying, well, if we can't keep the cat, you tell my kid that. If we can't keep the dog, you tell my kid that. So of course, what we've always said is we keep families together. We're not suggesting every family has to have a pet, but for families that have pets, they count them as members. So if we were truly going to be who we said we were, we had to honor that. So pet support started with just a couple of rooms in the basement of our main facility, funded by PetSmart. All of the funding for pet support comes from animal welfare funding sources. So in fact, we've been able to bring new resources to help homeless families. We are not taking resources away from homeless families. And as soon as we started doing that, and I'm just spending some time on this so you know this for referral purposes, as soon as we started doing that, because our shelter is relatively small, 8 families a night, so we would have space, right? We wouldn't always have families with pets. As soon as we started doing that, every domestic violence and homeless shelter in the tri-state area started calling us. We have a mom who won't leave her abuser because she doesn't have any place for her dog to go. Can you help us? We have a guy sleeping on the sidewalk out front because we won't let him in with his cat. Will you help us? So we slowly started helping other homeless and domestic violence shelters. And now this thing is its whole big thing. We served 14 pets in 2014. We served 1,054 last year. And so, again, using animal welfare funds, not funds that we could otherwise access for homeless humans, we have a whole expanded embedded pet shelter. We have contracts, now official contracts with other shelters so that we reserve a certain number of spaces for them. We get lots of referrals from places like the VA, veterans who are dealing with physical or mental health stuff and need a temporary place for their pet. And so that's its own kind of independent thing now that started with what we do for our families. So now we're basically able to duplicate what we were doing for our families, for families at other programs throughout Hamilton County. We go into northern Kentucky, southeast Indiana as well. All right, next slide. So back to shelter. Like I said, we did shelter a little bit differently until recently, using faith communities in the existing real estate of houses of worship. We had to quit doing that because since the pandemic, things have changed for faith communities. Many of them have shrunk. Many of them don't have the number of people or financial resources they used to have. Many of them have competing uses for their spaces, sometimes money-making uses like childcares and things like that they need to keep their communities going. And so what we were finding is even though we had many communities that still wanted to be involved, where they used to cover 8 weeks 20 years ago, they could only do 2. Or we'd have communities dropping out altogether. And that meant we could no longer offer a consistent level of capacity. And I already mentioned that there's only 2 shelters for family homelessness in Hamilton County. Bethany House is the other one. They're much larger than us. But even in our small 8 families a night, given what I told you at the beginning, we can't afford to lose a single slot, right? So we were in a situation where with the faith communities that we had, we could only serve 4 families. We actually need to be serving more, not less. So we have done a lot of work and a lot of discernment, and we are currently leasing a temporary site. It still doesn't get us where we want to be. It's about 6 families at a time in Price Hill, but it's temporary. And I'll tell you what the permanent plan is in a second. But it's a site now, so families aren't moving around. But we still need all of the help that we used to get from congregations. The thing about our model was not only that we used houses of worship. So imagine what that meant from a budgetary perspective. Our congregations provided the overnight space, all the meals, all the supplies, and we are suddenly incurring more than twice the amount of cost because we are having to do it as an agency ourselves. We're paying rent. We're purchasing everything we need. We have staff we never had before, right? Because volunteers used to cover the overnight staffing. So this has put a huge strain on us, again, at a time when the community has this elevated need. So we're working very, very hard to get back on track and sort of stabilize the model in a way that's going to work for families and the community and work for us. So we still need our faith communities. Something that volunteers, besides all of that financial stuff I just mentioned, that they provided to families that also made us special, is that they didn't have to be there. It wasn't just a poorly paid social worker who was there because they had to be with your family while you were experiencing the worst crisis of your life. It was a bunch of random people who maybe made you a little uncomfortable because you didn't know them, but who you realized showed up because they cared. They showed up because they cared about what your family were going through. And they sat down and had dinner with you and played with your kids and showed you some love and respect as a neighbor. That made us powerfully different than Bethany House, which does a wonderful job, so that's no knock. But imagine that message that sends to people who feel so forgotten. They've been hiding, remember, hiding in cars and parking lots. The message it sends that people that didn't have to showed up and wanted to just show them some love and support. So we need that back, for sure, first and foremost. The meal support is obviously so what our volunteers have done with meals is always so much better than what we can do and what we can provide. Encouragement and presence, and of course, financial support. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have this temporary site right now that we're leasing, calling Found House West and Price Hill. I realize that's a bit of a hike from here, and I'm not sure where all of you live, but it's a real nice place, very nice, nicely kept property, very welcoming, residential street. This is what it looks like. Next slide. And this is what we're looking for. We currently have, we're super excited, starting next week, we have 13 weeks of our previous faith communities signed up to host at Found House West. So hosting used to mean they came to your house of worship, right? Hosting now means some different things. So this is what some examples of what these communities are doing. In smaller groups, because it's a smaller space than like a giant church or a synagogue, they are doing 2, 3, 4 meals during a week where they show up. There's kitchens on site. They warm the food up there. They don't prepare it there. And they serve dinner, have dinner with the residents who are there. Most of the families that we serve in shelter at this point are working. That's actually not why they lost housing. It's because they don't make enough to afford housing in this market. So not all the families are there at one time. Some people are working first, second, or third shift. And so our current volunteers don't expect to see all of the families. They serve dinner to the families that are there and then make very lovingly packed leftovers to store in the fridges for the other families as they come in. Because there are kitchens on site at this property, families can also make some of their own meals. So our hosts for the week are stocking the pantries with non-perishable foods. We also provide each of the families $50 a week in Kroger gift cards for things like milk, perishable stuff, or things that might be specific to their family that they might need, around an allergy or a special food sensitivity or a religious restriction. And so our host groups are providing those for the week. They're also doing deep cleaning and stocking up cleaning supplies. And so they're treating, as they come on site, this location, how they would have treated their house of worship if they were hosting families there. Making sure it's clean, welcoming, there's plenty of food to eat, and that they're there to give that message that, hey, we know this is happening to you. It's not right. We care about it. We want to try to make sure it gets better. Now, that's what groups are doing as hosts, still coordinating as groups. Because we are no longer moving from houses of worship week to week, there's also the opportunity for individuals to plug in. Maybe you just want to do one dinner a quarter, right? Or you and a friend just want to do one dinner a month. Or there's some other ideas. Maybe you want to come and do all the April birthdays, throw a little party for the families on a Saturday. Do a Saturday brunch. Field trips. Something that's been super successful for us at the apartment building we run is we have a regular volunteer. She comes every Friday. She's actually a reporter at Channel 5. But she experienced housing loss growing up, and so she wanted to give back. She comes every week and signs up the kids and gets other volunteers, her friends, to help her, and takes the kids and parents on field trips. They've done mock news reporting at the studio. They've gone to the zoo. They've gone to museums, and it's been absolutely wonderful for both the kids and parents. So that's another example of a way someone could plug in and volunteer at the shelter site as well. As the weather gets nice, there's also the opportunity to, host a grill out, other kinds of things like that. The nice thing is we can be as creative as potentially you want to be in terms of coming on site. If you don't think you can come on site, we understand. That doesn't work for everyone. I will say there are lots of steps in this house, which is something I would warn you about if you're going to volunteer. It's an old 1920s, 3 floors, multiple steps kind of house. If you can't come on site because of location or other reasons, there's still ways that you can support us. We have St. John's Unitarian, who I think I saw an event in your program that they're doing, so you must be connected in some way. What they're planning to do is actually gather at their church and make meals and as a community event, and then pack them up and just have a couple of people drop the meals off. So it's still a community collective event for them, because they can't all come into this house because it's too crowded. So it's still a way for them to come together, but they're still assisting us, even though they're just dropping things off instead of really coming on site. So that's an example. You can do supply drives. You can do drives to support us around the holidays and center those activities right here if that's what works for you best. I'm going to stop for a second and ask if you have any questions about this before I continue. I have more, but I want to make sure if you have ideas or thoughts, you have questions, you can ask me about what you're thinking.
We use the mic because of the
Sure.
Zoom. I was sitting there thinking, see this part right there on our building? Mm-hmm. I think there's 3 rooms upstairs and 2 downstairs? Well, at least you can go to the bathroom. And I'm not volunteering anything. I'm just saying, I think a lot of churches that don't have schools or childcare in them have space they don't use during the week. Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. That's true. And we have a number of congregations who still have spaces. I have been advising a congregation in Oakley who is basically creating 2 safe drop-in rooms for families who are experiencing homelessness. And they're doing that completely independently. And we're happy to support in a general way, providing advice and providing referrals and things for those families. The challenge that we have is many places with space. So for example, this church is having to purchase a much more expensive insurance policy in order to do this.
Liability, yeah.
And one way to mitigate that would be to have people on site with them all the time. And so that's something the community has to be willing to do. Our staff can't be in all of the places. There's not enough of us.
There's a kitchen in the
Yeah.
other room as
So
well.
just, it's doable, and if that's something that your community has will to do, it's doable, and I could help you work through that and advise. But then that really has to be something that you guys take on as a community. Again, with us as an enthusiastic supporter, because our staff can't go to that many locations.
How many families are at the Found House in Price Hill?
About 6, depending on the family size. So we're still below capacity, and I'm gonna tell you a minute about our permanent plan, which is very exciting.
Okay.
Yeah. It varies a little bit because obviously a family of 2, a mom and a kid, versus a family of 6 takes up a very different amount of space. So there's always a little bit of variation in the total number. The total amount of people we can max out is about 25, 26.
Okay.
Other questions about what this space looks like and what we're asking for before I tell you about our permanent plan?
I just always wonder with organizations like yours, where does the money come from for the organization to exist, and who finds it?
Well, we get money from a little bit of everywhere. We are very much I call us a paycheck to paycheck organization. We do not have a giant endowment or a couple of rich friends who are helping us, so we're very much always scraping things together. But our funding comes from a number of sources. I mentioned for our housing programs, the biggest 75% of what we get for our housing programs comes from HUD. So that's why that public policy stuff is very important. And just to give some context around that, that's not just because we decided to rely so heavily on the government. The way that services across Hamilton County are structured, $33 million comes from HUD to house formerly homeless folks in Hamilton County every year. It's a coordinated process. We're organized into what's called a continuum of care, and it includes us, it includes Shelter House, it includes Over the Rhine Community Housing, it includes a bunch of agencies you've heard of who do this work. $33 million cannot just simply be replaced by passing the hat around, at a couple of meetings. So it's not as, it's the scale of the problem and the scale of what it costs to house people that requires government to be involved. So again, I encourage you to pay attention to what's happening with HUD. Besides that, we work with private foundations and get grants to provide services, and religious communities have continued for us to be in a huge donor base. And what's really hard is as congregations have quit hosting, they have quit donating, out of sight, out of mind. So as our costs are increasing, that donation base has gone down, which is really hurting right now. Individuals, we turn over every rock. That's partly a big part of my job. We also have a grant writer who does a lot of work in that area as well.
Did the loss of 92,000 jobs in the last reporting increase homelessness?
There's always a little bit of a lag between certain events happening and then when you see a spike in homelessness. Just because usually it takes a while for people to work through all their resources, work through friends and family, and then get to that point where there's nothing else. What I will tell you, the biggest thing that has influenced family homelessness since the pandemic, I mentioned most of our families are working in shelter. They just don't make enough to pay market rent. Right. And so stagnant wages And I mean, Cincinnati still has relatively low rents when you look at places like California. However, we've had one of the biggest increases in rent over the past 5 years compared to any other place in the country. So the pace at which market rent has increased while wages remain stagnant has created a position where, for people, the majority of the families we serve are below, I mean, if you're interested in these kinds of statistics, below 30% of AMI, right? Area median income, making, you know, maybe $30,000 or less a year. There is no place that a mom and 2 kids can rent for that amount. Like the math, there is not a math formula that accommodates that. So, you know, I think I read the other day, in terms of housing that exists in that category, for every 20 households who need it, there's 1 unit available in Hamilton County. So it is that gap between wages and housing costs that has really influenced what we're seeing right now with family homelessness. Next slide. Oh, yep.
This is probably more of a side question, but policy related. I can't remember if it's federal or at the state level that there's a crackdown on tent cities. I don't remember if this is legislation that's passed, again, federal, state, but you were talking about tent cities very early on in your presentation.
It's super,
and I was just kind of wondering how that plays into the work that you folks do.
It's happening on multiple levels. It has certainly come from the federal level in some of the Trump administration's executive orders. And then some states and municipalities are then falling in line, adopting policies that criminalize sleeping outdoors. So yes, some of the new stuff we have to do is, it's really hard. It's really hard to talk about. We don't want to compromise principles, but we also don't want to not serve people. We have to say we don't support letting people sleep outside. And in fact, we don't. That shouldn't have to happen. That shouldn't have to happen in this place. But yes, part of what they're trying to do with HUD is require that for communities to receive these dollars, that they have a policy to criminalize being outdoors. We are not quite there yet. Like I said, we got saved by appropriations. But from a policy perspective, yes, that is something we need a lot of advocacy around. It's really dark, isn't it? In terms of shelter, so we're leasing this temporary place. It doesn't fully meet our needs. And in fact, we want to find ways to serve more families and not less. But right now, we're just focusing on survival and getting our capacity back to base level. And we have wonderful news, which is Hyde Park Community United Methodist Church, which has been one of our longtime partners, has agreed to build out and host our permanent site at their OTR campus. So Hyde Park also owns Nass Trinity, which is on Race Street, right across from Washington Park. And next to that is a residential building they own that's just sat derelict for a few decades now. So that's the building there. The top 2 floors will have 8 family suites. Will be at our base capacity. They're building an elevator and connector to the church. So we will also have access to the commercial kitchen, gathering space, and their vision and our shared vision with them is that this is not a Methodist project, that this is a way to maintain the integrity of the interfaith model. And what they hope is that broad, diverse members of faith communities will show up there on this campus to continue to minister to families. So we're a couple years away because this has to be built. Of course, they're fundraising, we're fundraising, and we've gotten our first hint of disapproval from the business community because they spent so many years cleaning up Washington Park, they say. But remember, we're talking about primarily parents and children. 3CDC has actually been supportive, so it's not that business community. So we have a lot of hope that we're going to be able to get this pulled off. And then we're looking, again, that will only allow us to be at base capacity, but there's some other faith communities right in that area that are close by, which would make it possible for staff to be in a few different places as opposed into disparate neighborhoods that we're also talking to, so that maybe we can have a network of care right there, close to some other resources to address this growing problem in Hamilton County. I think this is the last, no, it's not the last slide. Yeah. So if you as a group or as an individual or as a group of friends want to get involved right now at our temporary site, and then hopefully you'll stick with us to the permanent site, you can email Leah Hassert, and that's her email address right there, and I can email this information in a different form to Jack, and he can share this with folks maybe in an upcoming bulletin if that works. And of course, I'm not doing my job if I don't ask people to donate wherever I go, at whatever level. So you can go to our website to do that, foundhouse.org. You can mail checks to our main office, and there's a QR code there as well. You know, a donation of $25 equals one Kroger gift card. And so that sounds small, but it's not nothing when it comes to our operations and how we're supporting families to get what they need throughout the week. There's some really dark, heavy stuff happening right now. But what I want to leave you with is actually hopefulness, because even though our model has shifted, we've still got all of these people who don't have to show up showing up. Hyde Park Community United Methodist, you know, I'm not saying any community is perfect, but we didn't make them do this. They looked and they said, oh, you know what? We've never done anything with that building. They need a permanent place. They showed up. They didn't have to. They showed up. We have people from St. Columban Catholic Church, which is over in Loveland, which is like as far in the Hamilton County universe you can get away from Price Hill, dropping off dinners because they're used to doing it and they make really good food, and they showing up in that way, even if they can't hang around a long time or do other things, is still meaningful and important to the families that are sheltered in that house. We've got other volunteers. If shelter is not your thing, I mentioned the apartment building and the great volunteer activities we have going on there. Those are families that are stabilizing. You can develop a longer term relationship than with families in shelter who turn over more quickly. And then I'll go back to pets. We operate an entire pet shelter. We have 3 shifts of volunteers, 365 days a year, who are walking dogs and cleaning cat pans. And so there is a variety of ways that you can support families who are going through this experience. And for the pet program, I can tell you, every time a family gets housing and they show up to get their pet, they know, again, someone who didn't have to showed up and made sure their beloved friend was cared for when they were experiencing the worst crisis of their life, so that they could get them back and they could be with them. And the tears and the gratitude and the joy, even if you never get to see it as a pet volunteer, let me just tell you, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. So the opportunities are diverse, so your excuse cannot be, there's nothing that fits my interest, because there's something all over the spectrum for you to plug into. And And I will quit babbling now. Other questions?
When the new site opens, are you going to be closing the one in Price Hill and
Yeah.
any of the others?
Well, we are, like I said, trying to figure out some other spaces we can add to the permanent site as a complement very nearby and over the Rhine as a permanent solution. We are paying a lot of rent in Price Hill right now. We won't be paying rent at our permanent site, so no, we won't maintain that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody on Zoom?
Thank you, Stacey, for a wonderful presentation. A lot of great information. Music reflection and the offering. One of our favorites, Lean on Me. And we do have some guests and visitors today, and as we always say, let the basket pass you by. Your presence with us today is gift enough.
Sing along if you want, guys. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow for, and no one can fill those of your needs that you don't let show. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on for. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on the phone. Oh, it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Anybody have a joy or sorrow you would like to share with us and kind of quality up our day as well as yours? As you know, joys are heightened and burdens are lightened when we share with friends.
Just real quick, we're going through the voting suppression, I guess the only way to say it, and homeless is in that too.
A little bit of an annoyance, sort of on the sorrow side. My mother has had a surgery that has been rescheduled and rescheduled multiple times. Originally, it was intended to happen in January, and then it was intended to happen in February, and then it was intended to happen next weekend, and now it is being rescheduled yet again for April 15th. So finally, we have a good reason, at least, which is that the doctor who was going to do her surgery had an accident, good being not an annoying, stupid one, but one that's actually one I say, yes, please take the time off and let the doctor get like their recovery in. But this has been a headache for her patients that she treats, and a headache for all of our family for the roller coaster that she's been through.
Some of us have been there before. Anybody else?
This entire presentation is wonderful, but it's actually resurfaced some memories. So 6 years ago, the day I graduated high school, my house was caught in a flash flood, and I was caught knee-deep in my living room in brown, dirty creek water. And I had gone from sleeping in the same room I had for 18 years to sleeping on a futon like 45 minutes away from the place where I grew up in. And even then, like I knew that I wasn't going to be put out on the street because that futon belonged to my older brother. And that man is my atlas. But it's times like these and places like these where I forget that I live in a bubble and I'm very privileged. And I'm reliving a sorrow, but then I'm experiencing a joy that I get reminded that, you know, people like this exist, and it's not just the Trump administration ruining everyone's day. And it's also wonderful people like everyone in this room that's working to stop that.
It's my joy that Rachel was able to drive up and visit me. So
It's too bad Sarah's not here. She's a pet person. She'd take all of your pets. Anybody on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom? And now we'll have our closing hymn and then some brief closing words, and then we will invite everyone to join us in the Quimby room for some coffee, snacks, and conversation.
Stand and sing with me, guys. This is a brand new one from the new UU hymnal. I'll play a little bit of it. So we've sung it before. There's no number. It's the UU hymnal that only exists online. So you just have to follow along. I am looking for shelter in a friend. We can build a beginning, but I do not know the end. I am scared of breaking when I bend. We will carry each other on the way. My courage is your courage when the journey is only getting longer. My strength is your strength. We will carry each other on the way. There are people that I have never met. There is something special and I haven't found it yet. There's abundance freely given, taken with no debt. We will carry each other on the way. My courage is your courage when the journey is only getting longer. My strength is your strength. We will carry each other on the way. My courage is your courage when the journey is
Closing words, we pray that what we have learned today will ignite within us a deep compassion that leads to action, not just words. May we be stirred to comfort the systemic injustices that cause suffering and to advocate for a world where everyone has a safe place to rest. Thank you for being here today, everyone.